The following program, Collaboration Radio, is sponsored by Collaboration, and to the extent applicable, their guests. The views and opinions expressed therein do not necessarily reflect those of NewsWeb Radio Company or its management.
Welcome to the big picture.
I swallowed a Hall. It was very bad, but I was saved by the guest. Jasmine, hope your CPR is up to date.
I'm ready.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Collaboration Radio. We're here at the intersection of arts, activism, and social change.
That was the sound of DJ Lady D, our official Collaboration DJ.
Who is right now, I think, performing at the Arc House Music Festival that's happening in Chicago. And it's become like a major thing. Like packed show down there. There's nothing to listen to in there. Just the opening. Jasmine's grabbing headphones, but yeah, it's over though. Yeah. If you listen to this one though, you can hear some salsa. Actually, check that out.
Wow!
Thank you for joining us here at Collaboration Radio on WCPT 820 AM, Chicago's progressive talk radio, and we're also streaming live on Facebook and on WCPT.com, and also Collaboration's YouTube Live. And you can find us on demand after the fact at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the other places where you get your digital vegetables.
I am Carla Stillwell.
Are you still well, Carla?
I am actually not today, but I'm here with my friends talking about important stuff.
I'm Anthony Moseley. I'm Collaboration's artistic director, and I use the he, him pronouns. And Dr. Marcus Robinson is in the house.
Yeah, y'all let me back up in here today. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak and share, and I'm interested in this labor talk that we're going to be doing here today, and this parody thing that we got going on with people getting paid right in theater. Whoever thought of that?
We're talking about equity and on Labor Day weekend, pay equity specifically, and workers' rights, and the very concept of labor. We're laboring right now here at the studio, bringing our life stories and our voices together to amplify some important stuff. And we had a great show last week with J.R. Pierce and Gabriella over at American Theater Magazine talking about the state of our industry. And you can go back and listen to that episode. It was great, wasn't it?
Yeah, insightful, clear thinking. It's a great show, if I do say so myself.
I was quite impressed with both of them. They were really lucky to have them here in Chicago, added to the journalism and the bringing some good perspective to what's going on.
And this week, I think we're going to get some really good context around some of that conversation last week, because we'll be talked about some of the theater closings and the landscape changing in Chicago theater, and the ground has shifted again this week. So I'm certain we will be touching on how the fiscal responsibility of organizations is playing into the changing landscape.
A perfect time to reimagine what things might be like in the future, and a more equitable future on this Labor Day weekend 2023 episode. Collaboration Radio is sponsored by the Joseph and Bessie Feinberg Foundation and donors and members like you. Email radio@collaboration.org or go to www.collaboration.org to learn more. You can be a sponsor, you can run an ad, or you could just become a member for as little as $1 a month and support this important work. As we're talking about the paradigm for the future, we do need everyone to chip in. And really, if you value art, step up and support it. And if you don't value art, ask yourself, why don't you value art? And what it is that you think art is that you don't value. So I guess we're all on the same page, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Today's episode of Collaboration Radio is sponsored by a company that's been stepping up for us for a while, AV Chicago, Chicago's leading provider of AV production and event management services. Speaking of labor, they have some super technical superheroes over there. They can take their very fancy equipment and make it work really well for your event. So give them a call. Tell them Collaboration sent you.
Collaboration is a 26-year-old nonprofit whose mission is to build knowledge, empathy, dialogue, and action around oppression and inequity through live theater, film, and now radio, or radio, as my grandmama from Mississippi would have said. So we are on the radio. We leverage the power of storytelling and community to cultivate positive social change. We have some special things coming up, collaboration news and updates. We have our next week, we will always be here on Saturdays on Collaboration Radio. Next week we have Pilar Audain, who is a Yoruba priestess. She is also one of the founders of the Truth and Healing, Racial Healing and Reconciliation organization that is working outside of Chicago Community Trust. She will be here next week with us to give us some, to help continue to put this conversation in context. We have our annual Utopian Ball. Coming up November 11th. Please go to our website, www.collaboration.org, and get your tickets. Come support. And you can also go to our website and become a member. We're doing the DNC thing. We're doing small donations, baby. So come and give us your support. We appreciate everything our audience does for us.
Yeah, so we could do more shows like this. And speaking of that, I have to say, because we've booked out a couple weeks in advance finally. Mm-hmm. So not only do we have Pilar Audain, we have Jorge Valdivia of Clata, who will be bringing on a couple artists from the Destinos Festival, which starts on the 23rd. And that's on the show September 16th. And then on September 23rd, we have Jamie Calvin, founder and former executive director of the Invisible Institute, who will be coming on the show. And the Invisible Institute is doing some amazing things around journalism and law and making things visible. And I am in correspondence with Dilla.
Oh, Dilla.
To have Dilla on the show on September 30th, the TikTok historian himself. He's quite a busy fellow, so he said he would check with the calendar. So Dilla, if you're listening, don't forget.
Check with the calendar.
Check the calendar. Let me know, because then
Ask the calendar.
Because then we would have 4 shows done in advance. That's pretty good, huh? Let's snap it up.
Ooh. Is the calendar like a magic ball? Do we have to rub our hands over the calendar?
We do. It's funny how as soon, look at all these names I have here on the list here. Jasmine's on there somewhere. We're getting to 2 of them. So let's do it, shall we?
Yeah.
Okay. If you're listening live, whether it's on the radio or on the Facebook Live or YouTube, you can still call in and join us at 773-763-WCPT. That's 773-763-9278. If you have a question or a comment you want to share with us, call in. We'll put you on the green light over there, and we will let you join the show quickly. Carla, take it away.
Today's artist spotlight is Jasmine Cardenas. Jasmine is a Colombian-American award-winning bilingual storyteller, theater maker, actress, educator, and social activist. Jasmine Cardenas is a theater maker who uses teatro and play to create spaces where people can connect, tell their story, and spark change. Her personal tales explore the uncomfortable truth found when we grow up between cultures. Jasmine also works with the collective Workers Teatro, who is partnered with UIC Center for Healthy Work. They are a research and education center that is trying to advance the health and well-being of workers, and they have been providing specific worker stories to give real-life examples that bring to life much of the data that researchers have gathered. And that is what we are going to be talking about with Jasmine today. Welcome to the show, Jasmine. So good to see you. You're so cute.
Thank you, Carla. And thank you, Anthony. I'm so happy to be here with you all. What an incredible invitation. As a representative of Workers Teatro, we are just blown away to be here with Collaboraction Radio. Gracias.
It's great to have you here today. We've worked with each other and side by side for a couple decades now.
Yep.
And it is cool to see how, and I'm just talking about you and me, how our work has grown, and you have done amazing things in merging your activism and your art, and it's really cool to be able to share this platform to talk about what's going on with Workers Teatro. Think you're going to tell us a story?
I am.
And then we're going to talk about the work?
I am going to share a little piece because I couldn't be here with my entire team, but my co-creator, partner and worker organizer, Isaura Martinez, is here in the studio with us in spirit, as well as the rest of the team. And so I wanted to share a little snippet of like one of the pieces that we have out in the interwebs that people can check out that gives you an idea of the worker experience at a factory. Okay, Maria, today is your last day in the line. No. A ver, sign here. No. No. Yo apenas llegué, no tengo mucho tiempo aquí, por favor. Hoy no es mi día para firmar. No, Maria, you've been here for 3 months. Really, Maria, please sign here. It's time to take your time off and take your break, your descanso. You like having breaks. No, es que yo necesito este trabajo, por favor. Yo necesito este trabajo. Listen, Maria, check in with your temp agency. They will give you another job. Your job placement is right around the next corner at the next factory. Don't worry. You'll have another location. Pero no, por favor, es que necesito este trabajo. Necesito este trabajo para mi familia. Estos son 11 años brincando sí, brincando no. En esta fábrica cada 3 meses me descansan. 11 años en estas, por favor. Yo escribo mis fechas porque no me gustan sorpresas. Yes. I know you've been here for 11 years. I'm sorry, it is every 3 months, Maria. That's just the way it is. Por favor, please, sign here. I know you need your work. I'm sure that you've made a mistake in your notes somewhere, because this here, my printout, is clear. This is your 3-month break. No, por favor, esta fábrica está cerca de mi casa. Yo no tengo tiempo para descansar. Quiero ser de planta, como esos trabajadores allá. ¿No me puedes dar una posición de planta? Maria, I understand this factory is close to your home. I understand that you would like to be one of the full-time workers of the factory, but the temp agency doesn't give you those jobs. You have to go to the temp agency and they will give you another placement. It's the law. Every 3 months you must take a break. I'm sorry, just sign here. No, es que necesito de planta. This little beat, this little moment, a window, a peek into the life of the workers at the factories is just staple experience. The factory workers who've been there for 10 or 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, but always as a temp agent worker. who, they show up, they're doing the same job on the same factory lines as all of the full-time workers, but those full-time workers have time off, they have sick time, they have insurance, they have all the benefits that a factory worker would have. The ages of when we had 100% union worker factories is gone, and those went from being 100% to 80-20, and to now they're like 20% are those committed factory workers with full benefits, and 80% are these temp workers from the agencies. And so we chose a name like Maria because there are so many Marias in Latin America, and sadly our experience is that the Marias today are Black workers and Latino workers, immigrant workers, workers that might be undocumented or might be documented, but maybe they don't have English solidly. So they have that disadvantage, and they're vulnerable because they don't have the language, but maybe they have papers to work. Our Black workers who've been a part of our team, maybe they have come out of incarceration and they are vulnerable because they need that job. And they're told that at the 3-month point they'll be evaluated and maybe they can get that full-time position. But the temp agency allows them to have a record, but the factory isn't okay with the record, the criminal record.
Right.
So they're cycling them through as 3-month workers all the time. And it is very common for them to get that paper, that notification of their last day on that 90th day. And so this is, a huge real problem, and the legal loopholes that these factories and these temp agencies work on is like standard practice now across the country. These temp agencies are some of the biggest temp agencies in the world, employing workers on multiple continents. And so our workers here are part of that, are part of that abuse, they're part of that discrimination, they're part of that racism, they're part of that just putting them under the elbow of the law, of the rules, but that they're getting away with murder. And so this scene tries to offer a little glimpse into the fact that temp workers are temp workers by design.
Right.
It is on purpose. It's not an accident.
Jasmine, where can people watch the videos and learn more about the work?
Absolutely. Thank you, Anthony. So we partnered recently with UIC. They have the School of Public Health has an organization called Center for Healthy Work. And we're so excited. We've been in this partnership for a couple years. And this is the UIC Center for Healthy Work is an organization that researches and pulls up data to provide policy support for labor rights, for workers' rights. And so we created these vignettes, this scene, the temp worker cycle by design is one of the scenes that's available on their website and also on my website, www.jasminecardenas.com, and also at the UIC Center for Healthy Works website, as well as other pieces. We created during COVID, we created a magazine with worker stories, but not leaning into the abuse of the worker, but recognizing workers as whole people. Their mothers, their fathers, their grandmothers, their daughters, they have joyful stories.
Right.
And unfortunately, these worker stories are so atrocious and abusive, and there's so much trauma in them that it's important to remember that we are whole people. So we wanted to spend some time during a difficult season of COVID when we were virtual and writing our stories down and thinking about moments that bring us joy and delight. But then also there's a whole section of questions for professionals and the experts. So workers brought questions to like COVID experts, to doctors, to lawyers about their safety on the factory lines and what were their rights. And so these scenes and these like interview questions and stuff are all on that website. We're really excited. We're going to be going with them to the American Psychological Association's Work, Stress, and Health Conference this November, 2023 in Miami, to talk about this work and give a workshop. Our work is based in theater of the oppressed, so that's the style and technique that I've used. I studied with Augusto Boal, and that technique is really an opportunity to find solutions. It's a solution-making opportunity, and it's so important that working people, that we get in our bodies and we remember that we are a whole person and that we deserve different treatment. But when you get abused for such a long time, you begin to, duck your head and just try not to make waves and go into the factory, do your job, and escape without getting fired. But theater allows us to have like a moment of interrupting the narrative that they're not valuable, interrupting the narrative that their needs don't matter by reminding them of their personhood, and then interrupting the narrative that they're alone and that maybe it's not that they wore a shirt that was too tight. And so they received unwanted notice and were the victims of sexual harassment or assault. It's not that they arrived a little too late that they lost their job. It's not that they, complained and said there was a problem on the line. They should have just been quiet. It's my fault. I shouldn't have said something. No, they're being fired on purpose because they speak up. They're being fired because they're disposable. And they're being fired because the factories don't want to keep them on the... they don't want to make them full-time, so they find a way to get rid of them every 3 months. And so that feeling of being isolated and alone, that's also how theater is a theater for interruption. We have to interrupt the cycle and the idea that it's my fault, but actually, no. This is by design, and this is happening to my friends. Oh my gosh, it happened to you during our rehearsals. People that have never met each other find out that the same story happened in a different factory. The same excuses are used to let people go. And then they realize that they're not alone. We're not isolated. When we're doing these ensemble building exercises, we're growing in awareness of our collective and our strength as people, and that it's necessary for workers to unite and that we have actual power. So when we show up to a factory to do an action, it's to remind those workers that they're not alone, that other people outside are seeing what's happening, that other people are aware of the abuse. It's to remind the employers that they're not alone, that these people have backup, that they're organized. It's
systemic.
Yes.
When I worked in HR, in corporate HR, we used to call it natural attrition. We would set up situations for people to quit. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, we know we're going to offshore these particular jobs, so we'll make it as uncomfortable as possible. And a bunch of these people are just going to start looking for other jobs if we tell them we're laying you off in 3 months. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So it is designed. These large corporations are designed for you to fail.
That's right. And it's legal for them to do that. Yeah. We need to change those laws because they shouldn't be able to do that. They're making millions on profit from the life source of these workers, and they should recognize their life source. If I've been working for you for 14 years and suddenly I have a issue with my wrist because I've been using the same repetitive movement at your factory, you should be responsible for my wellness and make sure that I get help that I need and healing time before I go back to the factory job and that I don't lose my job. Right. These are such basic, to me, they're human rights, but they're worker rights, and they're disappearing, those rights.
Absolutely.
Amazing work. Keep it up. Thank you so much for joining us on Collaboration Radio. Henry, I'd like to nominate Jasmine for the best two-character bilingual scene in the history
of radio.
of WCPT. Right? Can we? I mean, that's amazing.
Because I speak no Spanish, and I was like, what are they doing to her? Why is she? What is happening? Why is she leaving?
She had two characters, and she put this together like an hour ago. So
I knew it.
Keep it up.
Thank you, guys. If possible, if you could let people know that we are constantly, Workers Teatro is looking for partnerships with other worker groups because we want to share the technique of theater as an amplification tool, and we will come and do a workshop with your team so that maybe it might be a tool that's useful for the work you're already doing or a campaign you have.
Give your website one more time.
So mine is Jasmine Cardenas, JasminCardenas.com. We're building social media because this is an all volunteer effort and all of the workers are a collective, and I'm the most tech savvy of us, so that shows you that we're in trouble. But we're going to be doing community workshops on Tuesdays in Logan Square this fall, trying to reach out to workers that have been in this country for 30 years that are undocumented and vulnerable, and also this incredible new crisis situation with workers who are coming in as refugees from Venezuela and Central America, and they're displacing the workers who were vulnerable before them. And so of course, again, by design, there's conflict between the workers who've been here for a long time and the new ones coming. And we want to get to the heart of that and remind everyone that we are on the same team and we can be allies together. So yeah, Workers Teatro is trying to continue to move with the winds of change that are happening and the immigrant crisis that we have in Chicago right now that you're seeing spilling out of your police departments is a concern to us. It's affecting workers who've been here for a long time, and those new people who need work also need just work, equitable work.
Right.
They need work that will provide for their families because they don't want to be dependent on the government. They don't want to be dependent on charity. They want to work and fight for their families and grow a future here. So we believe in that. We believe in the spirit of work and that workers have value and that we're not disposable. So thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Great
Jasmine.
work. Amazing.
Collaboration Radio is supported by a social innovation group of Chicago, providing coaching, consulting, and training on the human side of enterprise. The human side of enterprise. Isn't that what we're talking about today? For nationally recognized work with collective impact groups in community, to large system change in business and government, to coach leaders to transform their organizations in pockets of excellence that are radically inclusive while driving breakthrough performance. Social Innovative Group, which happens to be Dr. Marcus's baby, is available to be contacted at www.drmarcusrobinson.com if you want more information.
Pipe up.
That's you.
That's me. Pipe up. And please do call in, folks, if you got some ideas you want to share. If you were stimulated by that fabulous presentation, definitely give us a call. Rattle that number off again.
773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278.
And now it's time for our featured guest on Collaboration Radio today, Elsa Hiltner.
Hi. My homie.
She's an internationally recognized organizer on pay and labor equity in the arts. For over 20 years, she's worked as a freelance artist and arts nonprofit administrator, including Director of Development for Collaboration, and her current role as Associate Director of Programs at Lawyers for the Creative Arts, who are a great organization. If you are an artist in Chicago and you need a lawyer, you should go check them out and send in a inquiry. They're very helpful. These experiences as an arts worker for Elsa deeply inform her work as an arts advocate. Her essays on labor and pay equity have inspired systemic change in the arts. Let me read that one again. Her essays on labor and pay equity have inspired systemic change in the arts, and that is true. And the tools she has created, including the pay equity standards and the theatrical designer pay resource, are both used nationwide by individuals and organizations to grow positive change. Her activism was integral in gaining pay transparency rules on all the leading theater industry job sites, including Paybill, Broadway World, and the League of Chicago Theaters, among others. She is the co-founder of the nonprofit On Our Team, and she's also a Collaboration company member and board member, and we're delighted to have her in the studio here on Labor Day weekend. Welcome, Elsa.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. And Jasmine, I want to say I'm so inspired by your work. It's so vital and needed, and we need more of it. And I started focusing on pay equity issues and labor issues in the arts because I got into garment worker issues that we are currently dealing with and historically that we have been dealing with. And as I was researching and reading and changing my own practices with clothing, I realized that that's what I was dealing with as an artist and a garment worker in theater too. And, you know, we're all dealing with the exact same issues for the same reasons. We're working the same structure. So we have these same like structural issues, and we can learn a lot from each other when we're dealing with those things. And so the way that you're pairing theater and worker activism is really inspiring.
Snap, snap, snap.
So if one of your superhero powers is fighting for pay equity, as Carla would ask, what is your what is your origin story? Tell us about the young girl, Elsa Hiltner, and where the track got laid for you to be creating national systemic change in this industry.
I guess. I've actually never really thought about this. So,
Yes.
Anthony, one question.
That's just Carla's first question. So
awesome. It's a good question. Yeah. I mean, I have always been really interested in people and art and expressing yourself in the way that clothes in particular. I was a costume designer for theater for many years until I started doing the pay equity work. So that really got me interested in, costume design and theater in particular, because it kind of combined art, design, self-expression, and clothes with other people and how you could make them feel things by putting certain images on stage and creating certain pictures and kind of building the background of the story. But at the same time, growing up, I was always very concerned about what was right and fair and like power dynamics and all of that. And so I did a lot of organizing as like a middle school and high school student around issues of homelessness and access to resources. And I founded a clothing kind of food bank for clothes, a clothing bank in Milwaukee when I was in high school that's still, I believe, running, or at least it was a few years ago.
What's the name of that?
The Avenue Store.
If you're up in Milwaukee, go in the Avenue Store. Tell them Elsa sent you.
And it was, the clothing is very important. It helps us express who we are, what we want to show other people. And so having clothes that reflect that for you is really important, whether you are, going to the grocery store or going to a job interview. And so that's all of that kind of, I was kind of on two paths, either like the social justice path or the arts path. And I decided to do the arts path first, figuring I could always come back and be a social worker later on if it didn't pan out. So, I guess in retrospect, this does kind of make a lot of sense as far as that path goes.
And the thing about you that I think is important is that you are both very, very extremely nice.
Yes.
And kind.
Okay, thank you.
And also tough.
Mm-hmm.
And fearless.
Tough as nails.
And that's the I think these days there's probably more people, most of them artistic directors at other companies, who are actually scared of you. And the thing is that if you're listening, I want you to know that Elsa's actually super nice. And all she wants you to do is listen and have some dialogue.
Well, thank you. Yes, that is actually all I want. And also to actually do something after we have that dialogue, the next step of change. But I think that as a woman who has to choose how I navigate through the world, I'm a white woman. People expect me to be nice and to be accommodating and to be helpful. And so, as an organizer, I've had to very specifically decide to use that to my advantage. And honestly, it's very frustrating sometimes, but also it's effective. But at the same time, as a woman, when I am direct, when I ask for the same amount of pay that a scenic designer is getting, or I advocate for others in a firm kind of way, people react often negatively to that just because of the way that I present.
And where do you think that comes from in them? Because I think that's whenever I see something that has a illogical response to a logical question, whether I do it myself or I see someone else do it, there's always something behind it.
I think it's actually a logical response when you think of the whole point is to maintain the system and the structure. Right. And so, if you are trying to keep, things stratified stratified. And you need to keep the people down that are easiest to keep down, and those are like marginalized people, right? So it's the same at the factories, right? Like, I am going to guess that the temp workers tend to be, Latinx, Black people, folks that don't have, documentation, and that the 20% are probably mostly white, and probably skews male for the 20 and female for the 80. And so you need to select the folks that you're going to keep down, whether or not you think about that or not. And so when one of those folks is not allowing you to keep them down, that's where the reaction comes. It's, if you're more focused on the system than changing it and realizing that we're all in this together and that we actually all benefit when we give people access to resources and a fair chance, I think that it can be, that's the logical outcome.
I also think there's an expectation of solidarity when you go in, when you walk into a room.
We're family.
Yeah, it's like, I didn't expect pushback from the girl with blonde hair.
Right.
I didn't expect that. I think that's part of the where the negativity comes from too.
Yeah, and that solidarity is another tool of the system to keep things in place.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's in my work. That boils down to stay in line pressure.
Right.
You're on our team. You're on our side. Stay in line, and I'll bark at you. I will make decisions that adversely affect you until you get back in line.
Definitely.
That's what that's about.
Yeah.
So all of these forces, Marcus, is this a tool of capitalism? Is this humanity and Darwinism? It's
the American caste system.
Yep.
It's how we organize our society, where there are relatively few with power, privilege, and influence, and everybody else gets to stay in line in our place. And even though you might be white, that doesn't automatically include you into the game, so to speak. In fact, white and not power, money and privilege, will adversely affects you the same way it does the temp worker on month number 3, because you get pressed into those awkward positions as well. We get subordinated, we get pushed down, we get boxed in, we get our pay band.
It's the Ponzi scheme of white supremacy.
Yeah.
It's all a Ponzi scheme. If you peddle it long enough, you will get a pink Cadillac. You will win. It's a and so you, person that looks like me, should also be in solidarity with the oppression, because it can be yours. I'll make it clear, it can never be theirs, but it can be yours.
Yes.
And what will it take for us all, or at least enough of us, to see a sea change, for people to build up communities instead of trying to trickle down?
Before we answer that question, I want to ask Elsa this, because people hear words and phrases, and then they start talking about critical race theory, and their heads start spinning because they don't know what it means.
Sure.
So what do you mean when you say pay equity?
Yeah, so pay equity is paying certain roles, worker compensation, based on meaningful things rather than bias. And so sometimes when you look at the industry, you'll see, in any industry, you'll see that pay is determined by the kind of work that's done, and not necessarily really looking at what skill is needed to do that work. And so you'll get these sort of feminized labor areas that are discounted versus the more masculinized labor areas that have higher pay. And the same with caretaking roles, or roles that we associate with immigrants or people of color. And so you need to remove those things so that it's just based on meaningful things rather than bias.
So kind of like how most domestic cooks are people and women of color, but most of the chefs you see on television are white men?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, exactly that.
That's it.
Okay. Just wanted to be clear.
Yep.
Snap.
And why is pay equity so important as we rebuild our theater industry?
So pay equity is essentially a economic barrier that we set up in the arts. And it means that if you're not being paid equitably, you need a certain amount of family privilege, a breadwinning partner, some sort of access to resources that allows you to pursue your art, have a long-term career, develop your craft, take those opportunities that might not be available to you if you have to pay for childcare or have a day job. And skill and talent are far more common than opportunity. And so we need to make sure that, as audience members, if we are, arts consumers, that we want to have a diverse art scene. We want to make sure that good art is being made. And so if we're setting up that economic barrier, we're not going to have that. The other thing that I think is important to note is that the largest subsidy for the arts is not foundations or ticket sales or earned income or donors. It's the unpaid and underpaid work of artists. And that's huge, that's the largest thing that's holding up the whole industry. And so the scale of the problem is pretty big. But, both artists and audience have a role to play.
What would you estimate the value of that unpaid work?
Oh, my gosh.
Industry-wise.
Yes.
I want to quote the great poet philosopher Sandra Delgado, because before I was working with Collaboration, she and I were in a room together of artists talking to some funders, and she said, I did the math. Sandra is an amazing performer and actor and singer, and she said, I did the math of a show I was in at the Goodman, and when I did, the salary looked like a great big thing on paper, they're paying me. But when I did the math of all the hours of studying lines, rehearsal, being in the space, I was making $11 an hour.
I believe it. Yeah. Sub-minimum wage.
That's higher than a lot of other equity contracts. I've been thinking about this. When someone volunteers an hour for a nonprofit, I believe the current rate that you value that is, I think, $22 an hour. That you as a company can count as an in-kind contribution for your volunteer hours. So what if, start with funders, DCASE, Illinois Arts Council, they required arts organizations to start accounting for the in-kind contributions to their financial records, so that you don't have to pay, you have to just acknowledge that you rehearsed for 30 hours a week for 4 weeks. You did this show, you had to show up 2 hours early, you had to stretch afterwards. You basically gave us 380 hours times 20. If we really made people count the in-kind contribution of artists, if nothing else, just to help make it visible, tangible, countable.
Now, I wouldn't be so upset with that contribution if they weren't also starving. They weren't also not able to make bills that are important to them, like child care and power, right? Where they were not subsidizing their gift by driving Uber and Uber Eats, right? Nothing wrong with those things. I actually like all of that freestyle kind of gig economy stuff. But on the other hand, we're asking the folks least likely to have the wherewithal to make the contribution, to make the largest contribution to the arts and culture community. That's the problem.
If you are trapped in a theater for 12 weeks doing that work, for at least those 12 weeks, you shouldn't have to have your Uber gig, especially when you're in a situation where there is an executive that's making $500,000 a year, $250,000 a year, when you have 5 people in the organization being paid almost $2 million, and you have people who are not making, like the stitchers and the big companies, the cobblers, the people, these folks are making $7-8 an hour when you get down to it, when you break their contract down.
So all this unpaid labor and we used to have another word for that. And in 1863, we abolished it, right?
But no, well, now we're just gonna, we can look to the future and we can call it what it is now, trickle-down economics. It's Reaganomics, pure and simple. It's been sitting on top of the arts industry for the last 150 years, and it has to stop. Because it's this idea that if you pay the artistic director, if you pay the 2 white men $1 million, their taste and their ideas will be enough to feed the bellies of these 8 actors who have been trapped in this room for 12 weeks.
Yes.
Well, and it all goes back on you're ultimately perpetuating a system of wealthy white people making work for those small donor pools. So they want to have the classy executive. Because let's say you took a major institution.
Don't name it.
Let's say you take a major institution.
People on Facebook just saw me fall out.
I was going to...
I'm back.
So, and you said to that team, like, let's say you're a $10 million organization. If you paid the lead executive 1.25, let's see, what would it be? 0.01...
Go for what you need.
$125,000 a year on a $10 million job, right? That's enough to live. Mm-hmm. You can put away some money to retire. The people that currently have those positions would never take that job. So the leader that you would get would have what? Way more in common and in touch with the artist in the building and with the regular person on the street. And then the work would shift. And you would end up with a more healthy ecosystem. Now, the very wealthy people that want to see certain plays by certain playwrights, where would they go? They'd probably start their own new club, and eventually their artistic director would be paid $500,000, right?
They would have Chicago Brecht Theater.
So really, what I just want to just lift this up because you've laid it out pretty well, but we haven't named it quite yet, and that is so when you think about the administrator class, okay, or the administrator, now I'm going to use the word cast, and then you've got the least valued worker class, whether that's the stitcher or the whomever, that's at least low caste, if not outcast, right? Outcast is you blackball. You can't come in here. Because you stick up for your rights too much. We don't want you on our side, kind of thing. And then there's all the folks who are striving to fit in somewhere and make meaning out of their lives, and so they end up in being co-opted in what I would call middle class. Mm-hmm. There's some mobility, and I can make a few more if I do the thing the right way. Blah blah blah. I even tell my mentees that are in the arts, I love it that you're a great artist, but get some arts administration skills, please. Get some management skills, business management skills. Get your MBA and your MFA. Kind of thing, because it's simply necessary because of the caste system. All we've done in capitalism is approximate the same system in private boxes, and we call those corporations. That's all that's happened here. And that we move it into this space called the economy, all right? In the United States of America, the economy is heart, brain, feet and hand, Mm-hmm. You can't touch that. And so they will sacrifice humanity for the economy. But because what the economy does is it keeps me in my $500,000 cash-driven provided job, and I'm living good, so with no skin off my nose. Can you see how even the most integral human being can be co-opted into a system like that over time, particularly the way we do it in the U.S.?
Check this out. To everybody who's a subscriber at a theater, I challenge you to go on the interwebs, go on Beyonce's internet, and Google the 990 of those theater, those nonprofit, not even theater, any nonprofit organization you give lots of money to, you believe in. Go Google the 990 because it's public information what a nonprofit earns and what they pay. And you will likely be disgusted at where your dollar is going, because it is not going to the art. It's not going, they trot out the little kids at whatever event, and like, these are the kids that we worked with in our arts and education system. But they trot them out, but that's not where that money is going. There's fleecing funders taking money from small nonprofits and culturally specific organizations and dragging and using that money to pay that arts and education person $15 an hour.
Yeah.
Or even more harshly, as Elsa pointed out, the 22 people who are on the cast who are making that contribution, of volunteer work, that's who's actually paying them. So there's if you hear a little bit of angst in my voice, is because there is a little energy in this idea that we have the thing upside down.
Yeah, and I think art can be done purely for passion also. You don't need to capitalize your passion and turn it into a job to be a legitimate artist. But the real problem comes in when you're asking the folks with the least power in the room to support the folks with the most power in the room.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you for that.
What are the next steps? How do we move forward, Elsa?
So there has been really good movement, which is great. We have far more pay transparency than we ever had before. I think people in the arts are kind of awakening to realizing the system that they've been working in for a long time. And I'm going to pitch the Pay Equity Standards, which is a program that I designed. It's essentially a checklist. It's based off of the fair trade and organic food labels, so that organizations that are able to check everything off the list, do all the tasks every single year to be on a path to pay equity, they can get this certification badge and share it with their audience so that folks going to see art know that people aren't being exploited to create it. That's very important to me when I enjoy things, that I know that other people are not being exploited. But then also to find workers that want to work at equitably paid organizations and foundations too are really interested in this. So it can be a sign that you're doing the work the right way and not just kind of saying that you are on the grant form.
What's your website?
You can go to onourteam.org to learn about the Pay Equity Standards and some other programs that On Our Team is doing. And then my website is elsahiltner.com.
Last question. What is a living wage in Chicago? Let's just start here. Okay. What's the living wage in Chicago right now?
So I haven't looked since June, and sometimes they update it. But it's a big range because what is a living wage depends on your household structure. So for a single person, I think it's probably just around $18 an hour.
Okay.
As you go up, if you have, 2 people in your household earning an income, I think it's a little lower. If you start having children, it goes up. If you're a single parent with, 2 kids, for instance, it's probably around $35 an hour. But it really is a wide range. And you can go to the Economic Policy Institute has a great living wage calculator that you can look for your state and county.
Can I count my 2 cats? When I'm thinking about my living wage, I have to feed the cats.
You can talk to the Economic Policy Institute about adding in cat
we got
kids.
2 minutes? If there's anybody in the world who wants to get on this conversation, you got 2 minutes. We'd share 30 seconds of it with you to have your voice on the air.
Call in. You know, if you're feeling kind of down about all this, let's remember that America is a very young country.
She is. She's.
And she is. Well, now you got me on the gender politics.
I'm sorry. I always call her that little girl, but that's okay. That's me.
But right, you know, and in a country that can have Brandon Johnson be the mayor of this great city of Chicago, maybe the trajectory of our future will bring to us more equitable, more socialist, more people first, dare I say, humanitarian policies and systems where everybody is taken care of. And as I, get older and one day become an elder, I sure hope that we can look back and remember these times and say, wow, there were some people that put some work in to make some change happen. And Elsa, you're definitely putting that work in. So are you, Jasmine. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us today.
Listen, Collaboration Radio is sponsored by the Joseph and Bessie Feinberg Foundation and AV Chicago. And you, too, can be a sponsor or purchase an ad and be part of our weekly show and podcast. Just email radio@collaboraction.org to inquire, and be sure to check us out. Follow us on all our social media platforms. We are Collaboration. Thank you, everyone, for this lovely conversation. Thank you, Jasmine. Thank you, Elsa. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Dr. Marcus.
Thank you, Henry.
It was great. We'll catch you next Saturday at 4 p.m. Central. And our guest will be